What happens when a 22-year-old demands equal billing with the league's MVP during their championship defense? You get the most toxic Lakers season that somehow produced the greatest playoff run in NBA history. Shaq was telling teammates to stop passing to Kobe. Phil Jackson called them both juvenile. The media said Kobe was reverting back to that selfish teenager who cost them Utah. But when the playoffs started, something clicked. The Lakers went 15-1. A record that stood for 16 years until Golden State broke it in 2017. And it all came down to one explosive night in San Antonio that forced the basketball world to see Kobe differently. But to understand how we got there, you need to go back to where it all started. The airball kid everyone laughed at. May 12, 1997, Delta Center in Salt Lake City. An 18-year-old rookie steps up in Game 5 of the Western Conference semifinals with his team down and the season on the line. The Utah crowd of nearly 20,000 smells blood. They know this kid has been getting big minutes all series, and they're ready to watch him crumble under the pressure. Kobe Bryant takes his first shot from the wing. Airball. The crowd erupts like they just witnessed a public execution. This dude doesn't even flinch. He gets the ball back a few minutes later, pulls up from three-point range. Another airball. Now the noise is deafening, the entire arena losing their minds watching this teenager fall apart on live television. But here's the thing. Kobe keeps shooting. Third attempt from deep. Airball number 3. The Utah fans are going absolutely ballistic, standing on their feet, pointing at this kid like he's some circus act. You can see his teammates looking at each other like, maybe we should get the ball to someone else. Fourth shot comes in overtime. Same result. Airball number 4. The atmosphere sounds like a construction site, with everyone banging on the seats and screaming. When that final shot clanged off the rim and Utah secured their 98-93 victory, those fans acted like they'd just won the championship. They'd broken the golden boy from Los Angeles. The numbers tell the story. 4 for 14 shooting in 28 minutes. For a rookie who'd been playing with supreme confidence all season, this was basketball hell. The kid who'd been talking trash to veterans just got exposed on the biggest stage possible. Those 4 airballs became instant highlight reel material, replayed on every sports show from coast to coast. Media outlets had a field day with the collapse. Headlines called him overrated, a high school project who wasn't ready for playoff basketball. Beat writers questioned whether Del Harris had made a massive mistake, giving this teenager meaningful minutes in a crucial series. Even his own teammates started whispering about whether the kid belonged in these high-pressure situations. This was pure public humiliation, not just missing shots. That happens to everyone. This was a complete breakdown in front of millions of people, with every single miss getting louder reactions from the crowd. The basketball world loves watching young stars fail, and Kobe had just given them the perfect highlight reel of failure. You know what separated Kobe from every other young player who gets exposed like this? Most guys would retreat, start playing scared, defer to veterans for the rest of their careers. That night in Utah could have destroyed his confidence forever. Coaches might have lost faith. Management could have decided he wasn't worth the investment. Instead, those 4 airballs became gasoline on a fire that was already burning inside him. While other rookies were spending their summers working on fundamentals, this dude was obsessing over that Utah game. Every missed shot in practice reminded him of that crowd noise. Every workout session was about making sure he'd never feel that helpless again on a basketball court. The basketball world wrote him off as another high school bust who couldn't handle the bright lights. Draft experts started questioning whether teams should take chances on teenagers. Veteran players used his collapse as evidence that young guys needed to earn their stripes before getting major roles in playoff games. But those critics missed something crucial about Kobe's psychology. That Utah game didn't break him. It forged him into something different. While everyone else saw 4 airballs and a choked rookie, he saw 4 reasons to work harder than anyone had ever worked before. That embarrassment became his fuel for the next 4 years. The kid who shot those airballs was still learning how to compete at the highest level. He was talented but soft, skilled but not yet ruthless. Utah taught him that talent alone wouldn't cut it when everything was on the line. You needed something darker, something that could handle the pressure and thrive in hostile environments. 3 years later, he'd helped deliver the Lakers their first championship. But winning that title would create an entirely different problem, one that nearly tore the whole thing apart. The championship hangover that nearly destroyed everything. Summer 2000, the Lakers just won their first championship together, and you'd think Shaq and Kobe would show up to training camp ready to run it back. Instead, they walked into El Segundo as 2 completely different people with completely different priorities. Shaq rolled up looking like he'd spent the entire offseason at his favorite barbecue joints. This dude was carrying extra weight, moving slow in practice, and acting like he'd already proved everything he needed to prove. He had his championship ring, his finals MVP trophy, and the respect of the entire basketball world. In his mind, mission accomplished. The Lakers were his team now, and everyone else needed to fall in line behind the big man who delivered that first title to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Kobe showed up looking like a statue carved from granite. While Shaq was celebrating all summer, this dude was in the gym at 5 a.m. working on his footwork. He came to camp in the best shape of his life, muscles popping, ready to attack every drill like his career depended on it. You could see it in his eyes during those first practice sessions. He was done being the sidekick. The contrast was wild to watch. Shaq would lumber through conditioning drills while Kobe sprinted past him like he was late for something important. When they ran plays, Shaq expected the ball to flow through him like it always had, but Kobe was demanding touches in spots where he'd never asked for the ball before. The comfortable hierarchy that won them a championship was getting flipped upside down. By January, the Lakers were sitting at 23-11, and Lakers fans were starting to panic. This was supposed to be the start of a dynasty, but they looked like a team that couldn't figure out how to play together. Their defense was a disaster, especially in transition, and their offense had no flow. Making matters worse, Derek Fisher had missed the first 62 games with a stress fracture, leaving the team without their steady floor general during the most crucial chemistry-building months. Instead of the beautiful basketball that won them a title, you were watching two superstars taking turns trying to prove who deserved to be the alpha. The locker room felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. This wasn't about basketball anymore. This was about power, respect, and who got to control the direction of the franchise. Shaq felt like he'd earned the right to be the unquestioned leader after delivering that championship. But Kobe wasn't the same deferential 21-year-old who was happy just being along for the ride. You could see the tension during games. When Kobe would wave off a screen to go one-on-one, Shaq would shake his head and jog back on defense. When Shaq would call for the ball in the post and Kobe would keep dribbling, the big man's body language screamed frustration. Their teammates started walking on eggshells, never knowing which superstar they were supposed to feed the ball to. Practice sessions turned into subtle competitions between them. If Kobe dropped 30 in a scrimmage, Shaq would make sure to dominate the next day. If Shaq had a monster game, Kobe would come back and shoot every time he touched the ball. Phil Jackson was trying to manage two egos that were growing bigger by the day, and the rest of the team was caught in the middle. The crazy part is that both guys had legitimate reasons for feeling the way they did. Shaq had just proved he could carry a championship team, but he was also getting older and knew his window was limited. Kobe was entering his prime and could feel his skills surpassing everyone around him, but he was still treated like the junior partner in the relationship. What made this whole situation so dangerous was that they were both right about their value to the team. The Lakers needed Shaq's dominance in the paint and his ability to draw double teams, but they also needed Kobe's scoring ability and his clutch gene in the big moments. The problem was that neither guy wanted to be the complementary piece anymore. The championship hangover revealed the fundamental flaw in their partnership. You had two alpha dogs who both believed they deserved to be the pack leader. One basketball, two superstars, and a lot of unresolved issues about who really made that first championship possible. What happened next went way beyond typical locker room tension. The situation was about to get personal in ways that would shock even longtime NBA observers. When your own teammate tells others to freeze you out, your own teammate is giving secret hand signals to freeze you out of the offense. That's not basketball drama. That's straight-up warfare disguised as team sports. According to reports that emerged later, Shaq had reached the point where he was actively sabotaging Kobe's touches during games, and everyone in the organization knew it was happening. The breaking point came when Shaq went public with his frustration. He laid out the numbers for everyone to see, contrasting their championship season with their current struggles. The message was clear. When I was the clear number one option, we won a championship. Now that Kobe wants equal billing, we're mediocre. That public statement destroyed any pretense that this was just typical teammate tension. Shaq was basically telling the media and the fans that Kobe was the problem. He was throwing his teammate under the bus in the most public way possible, making it clear that he believed the Lakers' struggles were directly tied to Kobe's increased role in the offense. But here's where things got really toxic. According to former Lakers player Raja Bell, who revealed this years later, Shaq reportedly had a secret code where he would signal to teammates that they should stop passing to Kobe. Bell claimed Shaq explained this as a strategy he'd used when Kobe was younger and playing too selfishly. Think about how messed up that is. You're running plays designed to get your teammate open looks, but your other teammate is secretly telling everyone to ignore those plays. Kobe would be cutting to the basket or setting up on the wing, expecting the ball, while Shaq was behind the scenes orchestrating a freeze-out. That's like having your own general sabotage the battle plan while you're fighting the war. The locker room atmosphere became absolutely poisonous. Players were choosing sides without saying it out loud. Some guys felt like Shaq had earned the right to be the primary option after delivering that championship. Others could see that Kobe was clearly the better player at this point in their careers and deserved more touches. Nobody wanted to get caught in the crossfire, so they just kept their heads down and tried to stay out of it. Phil Jackson was losing his mind, trying to manage this situation. He called both players out publicly, describing their behavior as really juvenile stuff, sandbox stuff, and saying he was totally angry about the whole mess. Jackson felt like he was coaching middle schoolers instead of professional basketball players. The constant media attention made everything worse, turning what should have been internal team issues into daily soap opera drama. The media was having a field day with the dysfunction. Every practice became a story. Every post-game interview was analyzed for subtle shots between the two stars. Critics started saying that Kobe was reverting back to his selfish teenage mindset, the same attitude that supposedly cost them the Utah series. They painted him as this immature kid who couldn't handle being the second option on a championship team. What made the whole situation so dangerous was that both guys were playing their frustrations out on the court. When Shaq didn't get enough touches, he'd pout on defense. When Kobe felt frozen out, he'd force bad shots to try and get his numbers. Their personal beef was directly affecting their performance in games that actually mattered for playoff seeding. The rest of the team was walking around like they were living in a broken home with parents who couldn't stop fighting. Veterans who should have been focusing on winning were instead trying to figure out how to navigate between two superstars who clearly couldn't stand each other. Role players were afraid to make the wrong pass because it might set off one of the stars. The toxic environment was spreading through the entire organization. Front office executives were getting pulled into conversations about who to support long-term. Coaches were having to design different plays depending on which star was feeling more sensitive that particular day. The power struggle had reached a breaking point where something had to give. The Lakers couldn't continue with this level of dysfunction and expect to compete for championships. That's when management decided they needed to bring in someone with enough credibility to get both superstars to listen. Magic's emergency intervention. Magic Johnson walked into that building knowing he was the only person who could reach both superstars. The Lakers front office had called in their greatest legend to play family therapist before their feuding stars completely destroyed each other. Magic scheduled separate meetings with both Shaq and Kobe before their game against Cleveland on January 12th. This wasn't some casual conversation in the hallway. This was an emergency intervention from a guy who understood exactly what these two were going through. Magic had been in Kobe's position before, playing alongside another dominant superstar who already had his place in Lakers history locked up. The beauty of bringing Magic in was that he could speak to both players in their own language. When he talked to Shaq, he could relate as a former superstar who understood the pressure of being the franchise cornerstone. When he sat down with Kobe, he could share what it felt like to be the younger guy trying to establish himself alongside an established legend. Magic had lived through this exact dynamic with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar during those championship runs in the 1980s. Magic's message was simple and direct. He told both players that winning had to come first. No complicated psychology or relationship counseling. Just a basic reminder that their individual egos needed to take a backseat to championship goals. He believed these guys were professionals and two of the best players in the league, so they'd figure out how to work through their differences. Here's what made Magic's intervention so effective. He didn't try to fix their relationship or make them best friends. He just gave them a framework for functional cooperation. Magic understood that you don't need to love your teammate to win championships with him. You just need to respect his talent and find ways to maximize what both of you bring to the table. The conversation with Magic hit differently for Kobe because it came from someone who'd actually walked that path before. Magic shared insights about those successful Laker teams from the 1980s, explaining how different personalities and playing styles could coexist when everyone stayed focused on the ultimate goal. His advice to Kobe was about staying focused on the game itself and enjoying the competition. Magic also provided some perspective on how their situation looked from the outside. He pointed out that the Lakers were only 2 games out of having the best record in the NBA, which meant the drama was getting blown out of proportion by the media. The fact that they hadn't gotten on the same dominant role as the previous season was making every little conflict seem like a major crisis. What Magic brought to those meetings was credibility that nobody else in the organization could match. When your coach calls you immature, you might get defensive. When some front office executive tries to lecture you about teamwork, you probably tune them out. But when Magic Johnson, the guy who won 5 championships as a Laker, tells you to get your act together, you listen. The intervention didn't magically solve all their problems or turn Shaq and Kobe into best friends. The tension remained high even after Magic's mediation, and they still had their moments of competing egos throughout the rest of the season. But Magic's conversations gave them a new lens for viewing their relationship, not as a zero-sum competition where one guy had to lose for the other to win, but as a partnership where both players could thrive within their roles. Magic's mediation created just enough breathing room for both superstars to step back from the edge. Instead of escalating their feud into something that could have destroyed the season, they found a way to channel their competitive energy against other teams instead of each other. The rivalry was still there, but now it had boundaries and direction. The Lakers finished the regular season at 56-26, earning the second seed in the Western Conference. They'd survived their internal warfare and managed to keep their championship hopes alive despite months of dysfunction. The postseason was about to reveal whether all that drama had been worth it, and whether this fractured team could actually come together when everything was on the line. The Spurs stood between Kobe and his redemption. The Lakers had just steamrolled through Portland and Sacramento like they were playing against high school teams. 2 consecutive sweeps, 0 losses, and suddenly everyone was talking about how this might be the most dominant playoff run in NBA history. But now they faced their biggest test, the top-seeded San Antonio Spurs, led by Tim Duncan, with home court advantage and a 58-24 regular season record that was 2 games better than the Lakers' 56-26. San Antonio represented everything the Lakers weren't supposed to be able to handle. They had the fundamentals, the discipline, the veteran leadership, and most importantly, they had Duncan in his absolute prime. This wasn't some flashy team that relied on athleticism or star power. These were the Spurs, grinding out victories through perfect execution and suffocating defense. They'd earned that top seed by being better than the Lakers for 82 games. But here's the thing. This series meant something deeper for Kobe than just advancing to the finals. 4 years had passed since those 4 airballs in Utah. 4 years of carrying that embarrassment and listening to critics question whether he could handle the big moments. Every playoff series since then had been viewed through that lens. Could this guy actually perform when the lights were brightest? Or would he revert back to that panicked teenager who choked when his team needed him most? The basketball world was watching to see which version of Kobe would show up in San Antonio. Would they get the composed superstar who'd been putting up elite numbers all season? Or would the pressure of facing Duncan and the Spurs bring back those old demons? This series felt like the ultimate test of his growth as a player and his ability to handle hostile environments where every possession mattered. The Alamodome was going to be absolutely brutal. San Antonio fans had been waiting all season for this moment. Their team had earned the right to host the conference finals, and they were ready to make life miserable for any Laker who stepped on their court. The crowd noise, the playoff atmosphere, the knowledge that one bad game could shift the entire series, all of it was designed to break players who weren't mentally strong enough to handle the pressure. This series represented everything Kobe had been working toward since that nightmare in Salt Lake City. Validation that he belonged among the league's elite players. Redemption for that teenage mistake that had haunted him for 4 years. Respect from critics who still viewed him as too young and too reckless to be trusted in crucial moments. The narrative pressure was suffocating. Win this series, and Kobe would finally shed the airball label forever. Lose this series, especially if he struggled individually, and all those old questions about his mental toughness would resurface. Duncan and the Spurs represented the perfect measuring stick for where Kobe's career stood in 2001. These weren't some aging veterans coasting on reputation or some young team that might get overwhelmed by the moment. This was a championship-caliber squad with the best power forward in the league, playing in front of their home crowd with everything on the line. May 19, 2001 was circled on everyone's calendar as the night that would define how the basketball world viewed Kobe Bryant moving forward. Game 1 in San Antonio would either validate 4 years of intense preparation and mental growth, or it would send him right back to those dark memories of shooting airballs while 20,000 people laughed at his misery. Nobody knew which Kobe would walk onto that court, the kid who crumbled under pressure, or the superstar who'd spent 4 years obsessing over this exact moment. One thing was certain, the Alamodome was about to witness something that would change everything. 45 points in San Antonio, the night Kobe broke Shaq. Game 1, Western Conference Finals at the Alamodome, May 19, 2001. A 22-year-old walks into the most hostile arena in basketball, facing 36,068 screaming Spurs fans, and proceeds to absolutely demolish the top-seeded team. 45 points and 10 rebounds later, he'd force the league's most dominant player to publicly surrender and call him the best in the game. This wasn't just another big scoring night. Kobe came out firing from the opening tip like a man possessed, hitting shots from every angle while Tim Duncan and the Spurs defense had no answer. Every time San Antonio made a run, Kobe would pull up from deep or drive to the basket and crush their momentum. The Alamodome crowd went from loud and confident to stunned silence as this young Laker systematically picked apart their defense. The shots were falling. But more than that, Kobe was playing with a controlled aggression that nobody had seen before. He wasn't forcing anything or trying to prove a point, he was just executing at the highest level while the Spurs scrambled to find someone who could slow him down. Every possession felt inevitable, like he knew exactly where he wanted his shots before the ball even got there. You could see it in his body language throughout the game. No frustration when teammates didn't get him the ball fast enough. No celebration after huge buckets. Just pure focus and determination, like he was checking items off a mental list that he'd been carrying around for 4 years. This was the performance he'd been visualizing since those airball nights in Utah. And now it was finally happening on the biggest stage. Here's the thing. This wasn't Kobe trying to show up Shaq or prove he was the better player. This was him proving that he belonged on this level, that he could carry a team through the toughest playoff matchup they'd face. Every bucket was an answer to every critic who'd questioned his mental toughness. Every rebound was proof that he could impact the game in multiple ways when his team needed him most. The Spurs threw different defenders at him throughout the night, but nothing worked. Derek Anderson, Antonio Daniels, Sean Elliott, Terry Porter, they all got scorched by a player who seemed to be operating on a different level than everyone else on the court. San Antonio's vaunted defense looked helpless against someone who was hitting contested shots like they were warm-up jumpers. Shaq was watching all this unfold from the other end of the court, probably realizing that his young teammate had reached a level that demanded serious respect. The big man had been dominant himself with 28 points and 11 rebounds, but this game belonged to Kobe from start to finish. This was the night Shaq finally understood that he was playing alongside someone who could take over games in ways that even he couldn't. The final score was 104-90, but it felt like a much bigger blowout because of how thoroughly Kobe had controlled the flow of the game. The Lakers had just stolen home court advantage from the top seed, and everyone in the building knew who was responsible. After the game, Shaq made a statement that nobody saw coming. He called Kobe his idol and the best player in the league, by far. The same guy who'd been giving hand signals to freeze out his teammate was now publicly acknowledging that this 22-year-old had reached a level that even the league's most dominant center had to respect. That quote from Shaq told you everything about what had just happened in San Antonio. This wasn't just a great individual performance. It was the moment when the power dynamic between the Lakers' two superstars shifted forever. Shaq wasn't giving up his role as the team's anchor, but he was recognizing that Kobe had become something special. The performance unlocked something in both Kobe and the entire Lakers team. They'd just watched their young superstar take over a crucial playoff game against an elite opponent, proving that he could deliver when the stakes were highest. The confidence from that night was about to carry them through something unprecedented, the 15-1 record that stood for 16 years. What followed that San Antonio explosion was the most dominant playoff run in NBA history. The Lakers completed the Spurs sweep, outscoring Tim Duncan's team by double digits in 3 of the 4 games, then rolled into the finals against Philadelphia with the kind of momentum that makes other teams start planning their summer vacations early. The numbers from that playoff run tell the story of a player who'd completely transformed his approach to basketball. Kobe averaged 29.4 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 6.1 assists across 16 playoff games, proving he wasn't just a scorer anymore, but a complete player who could impact every aspect of the game. Those assist numbers were crucial because they showed he'd learned how to balance his individual dominance with team-first basketball, exactly what Shaq had been demanding all season. Here's what made those numbers so impressive. Kobe was putting up elite scoring while also making his teammates better. He wasn't hunting for his shots at the expense of good basketball. When teams doubled him, he found the open man. When Shaq needed touches in the post, Kobe made sure to get him the ball in good positions. The selfish teenager who'd supposedly cost them Utah was now orchestrating an offense that looked unstoppable. Shaq noticed the evolution and started praising Kobe's passing in post-game interviews. The big man was finally seeing the player he'd been waiting for, someone who could take over games when needed, but also understood when to involve his teammates. The toxic dynamic from earlier in the season had transformed into genuine basketball chemistry, with both superstars playing to their strengths without stepping on each other's toes. The finals against Philadelphia presented one final test for this historic run. The 76ers had Allen Iverson in his absolute prime, fresh off an MVP season where he'd carried his team through the Eastern Conference playoffs. This wasn't going to be another sweep. Philly had the kind of star power and desperation that could disrupt even the most dominant teams. Game 1 at Staples Center on June 6th proved that point perfectly. The 76ers came out swinging like they had nothing to lose, matching the Lakers shot for shot through regulation before stealing a 107-101 overtime victory. That loss marked the Lakers' only playoff defeat of the entire postseason, the single blemish on what could have been a perfect run to the championship. The beauty of that Philadelphia loss was how the Lakers responded to adversity. Instead of panicking or reverting back to their old dysfunction, they locked in and proceeded to win 4 straight games to close out the series. Each victory felt more commanding than the last, with Kobe and Shaq taking turns controlling different aspects of the games while their role players filled in perfectly around them. Shaq earned his second straight Finals MVP award, but everyone knew this championship belonged to both superstars equally. That 15-1 playoff record became the gold standard for postseason excellence. The mark stood for 16 years until the Golden State Warriors finally topped it in 2017, which tells you everything about how special that Lakers run truly was. Most championship teams are happy to survive the playoffs with their health intact. These Lakers were dismantling elite opponents like they were playing pickup games at the local gym. Kobe at 22 had completed one of the most remarkable transformations in basketball history. The airball nightmare from Utah had become a championship assassin who could take over games while also elevating his teammates. He'd proven he could handle the brightest lights, the most hostile crowds, and the highest pressure moments without flinching or reverting back to his teenage mistakes. The real transformation went deeper than just putting up big numbers. Kobe had developed the kind of mental toughness that separated superstars from role players, the ability to perform when everything was on the line while also making the right basketball plays. He'd learned how to be selfish and selfless at the same time, taking over when his team needed scoring while deferring when the situation called for it. That playoff run established Kobe as one of the league's elite players and set the foundation for what would become a decade of championship-level basketball. The kid who'd been mocked for those Utah airballs had forged himself into something entirely different. The basketball world had just witnessed the birth of a relentless competitor who would dominate for the next decade. This dude no longer cared about approval or what critics thought. He only cared about winning. That 2001 run proved Kobe could take over when his team needed scoring and sacrifice when the situation called for teamwork, earning respect through performance rather than politics. The 15-1 record wasn't just about raw talent. This was about a 22-year-old who had been forged in the fire of public humiliation and emerged as a clutch performer ready to lead championship teams. This second title in what would become a three-peat showed that Utah had created a monster that would terrorize opponents for years to come.